The morning sun over the Whispering Oaks subdivision was usually the harbinger of bird songs and the gentle hum of lawnmowers. But today, the silence was shattered by the rhythmic, sharp thwack of a designer clipboard hitting a palm. Arthur stood in his driveway, squinting against the glare. Across the cul-de-sac stood Brenda, the self-appointed president, judge, and executioner of the Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association. She was dressed in a beige linen suit that screamed, "I'd like to speak to the manager of the universe." "Arthur," she shrilled, marching across the pavement. Section 4, Paragraph B. No commercial vehicles parked in residential driveways for more than 2 hours. It's been 3. Arthur looked at the black SUV parked behind his sedan. It was spotless, unmarked, and sat there with a quiet, menacing authority. "Brenda, it's a Saturday and it's not a commercial vehicle, it's my wife's work car." "It's an eyesore," Brenda snapped, scribbling something on a bright yellow violation slip. "And frankly, Arthur, we need to talk about your guest. I've seen her coming and going at odd hours. The bylaws are very clear about unregistered long-term occupants. If she's living here, she needs a background check through the HOA board. We have standards to maintain. This isn't a halfway house." Arthur felt a familiar twitch in his eyelid. His wife, Elena, had been undercover for 3 months on a high-stakes federal task force. She'd been home for exactly 48 hours, most of which she had spent sleeping off the exhaustion of a grueling assignment. "She isn't a guest, Brenda, she's my wife. We've been over this. She travels for work." "So you say?" Brenda smirked, a look of pure venom crossing her face. "But I see her, hoodies, sunglasses, sneaking in at 3:00 a.m. She looks unsavory. The neighbors are talking. We think she might be involved in something illegal. I've already contacted the authorities." Arthur froze. "You did what?" "I called the police, Arthur. I told them we have a suspicious squatter who refuses to identify herself and might be a threat to the community. They're on their way." Arthur checked his watch. He thought about waking Elena, but then he remembered she hadn't slept in a real bed for weeks. He decided to let it play out. "Brenda, I'd suggest you go back to your house and maybe rethink this." "I will do no such thing," she huffed, crossing her arms. "I am protecting the integrity of this neighborhood." 10 minutes later, 2 local patrol cars pulled into the cul-de-sac, lights flashing but sirens off. 2 officers, young and looking slightly annoyed to be on HOA duty, stepped out. "Afternoon," one said, nodding to Arthur. "We got a report of a suspicious person and a potential trespassing issue." Brenda pounced. "Officers, thank goodness, that man is harboring a woman who hasn't been vetted by the board. She's currently inside, likely hiding. I want her removed and trespassed from the property immediately. She's a vagrant." The lead officer, a man named Miller, looked at Arthur. "Sir, is there someone else in the house?" "My wife is upstairs sleeping," Arthur said calmly. "She's had a long week." "She's a liar," Brenda shouted. "She's a squatter. I've never seen her at the Christmas potluck. If she lived here, she'd be on the registry." Officer Miller sighed. "Sir, for the sake of the report, can we just see some ID or have her come out? If we verify she lives here, we can leave." Arthur sighed. "I really didn't want to wake her up. She's a bit grumpy when she's tired." "I bet she is," Brenda muttered, "probably coming down from whatever she's on." Arthur gave Brenda a look that would have withered a cactus, then turned and walked into the house. He climbed the stairs and entered the darkened master bedroom. Elena was sprawled across the king-sized bed, her dark hair a mess against the pillow. "Hey," Arthur whispered, shaking her shoulder gently. Elena's eyes snapped open. In a fraction of a second, her hand went under the pillow where she usually kept her service weapon. Before she realized she was home, she exhaled, rubbing her face. "Artie, what's wrong? Is the house on fire?" "Worse," Arthur said with a lopsided grin. "Brenda called the cops on you. She thinks you're a squatter and a drug dealer." Elena stared at him, blinking slowly. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, then she sat up, a terrifyingly calm smile spreading across her face. "She called the local PD to my house?" "To your house." Elena stood up, stretching her back until it popped. She didn't put on a dress or a robe. She grabbed her leather jacket from the chair, her heavy boots, and her leather wallet-style badge holder. Outside, Brenda was lecturing the officers on the importance of curb appeal and how certain elements were lowering the property values. "I'm telling you, she's dangerous," Brenda insisted. Look at that car, it's tinted, probably used for. The front door of Arthur's house swung open. Alina stepped onto the porch. She looked every bit the part of someone who had just spent months in the trenches. She wore faded jeans, a black t-shirt, and a look of cold, professional fury. Officer Miller and his partner straightened up instantly. They didn't recognize her face, she'd been undercover, but they recognized the command presence. "There she is," Brenda shrieked. "That's the vagrant. Officer, do your duty, handcuff her." Alina didn't say a word. She walked down the driveway, the gravel crunching under her boots. She stopped 2 feet from Officer Miller. Without breaking eye contact, she flipped open her leather wallet. Gold flashed in the sunlight. A heavy, intricate shield sat pinned above an ID card that bore the seal of the governor and the title, Colonel Elena Vance, Commander of State Police. The color drained from Officer Miller's face so fast he looked like he might faint. He snapped to attention, his heels clicking together. His partner followed suit, looking like he wanted to vanish into the pavement. "See Colonel Vance," Miller stammered. "Ma'am, we didn't know, we got a call about a squatter." Alina's voice was like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. "A vagrant, a drug dealer." Brenda stood frozen, her mouth hanging open. That's a fake, it has to be fake. Arthur, you hired an actress too." "Officer Miller," Alina said, ignoring Brenda entirely. "Is it standard procedure for your department to respond to HOA disputes by attempting to throw out residents without verifying property deeds first?" "No, ma'am," Miller said, sweat beading on his forehead. "The complainant stated there was a trespasser in progress and a potential threat to life. We were told you were an intruder." Alina turned her gaze to Brenda. It was the look she used on cartel leaders and corrupt politicians. Brenda actually took a step back, her clipboard trembling. "Brenda," Alina said softly, "I spend my days managing 4,000 troopers and coordinating with the Department of Justice. I spend my nights worrying about the safety of this entire state. And yet, I come home to find that you have used emergency resources, taxpayer-funded 911 services, to harass my husband because you don't like the tint on my windows." I was just following the bylaws," Brenda squeaked. "Section 4, paragraph B. Filing a false police report is a crime." "Brenda," Alina said, stepping closer. "Wasting the time of these officers is a crime, and if I hear one more word about my background check, I will have the State Bureau of Investigation look into the HOA's tax filings for the last decade. I've lived in this neighborhood for 5 years. I pay my dues. I just don't go to your potlucks because I'm busy putting people like you, people who abuse power, behind bars." Brenda looked at the officers for help. They both looked away, suddenly very interested in the trees. "Officers," Alina addressed them, "you are dismissed. I believe you have actual crimes to go solve." And Miller, "Yes, ma'am. Next time Brenda calls, tell her to put it in an email." "Understood, Colonel." The officers practically dove back into their cars and peeled away. The cul-de-sac was silent. A few neighbors had come out onto their porches watching the spectacle with suppressed grins. Everyone hated Brenda. Alina turned back to Brenda, who was now clutching her clipboard like a shield. "One more thing," Alina said. "That SUV in the driveway, it's a state-issued armored vehicle. If you touch it, if you put a violation sticker on it, or if you even breathe on the windshield, I will have it impounded, with you inside it, for tampering with government property. Am I clear?" Brenda nodded frantically, her face a shade of purple that almost matched her blazer. She turned and sprinted back to her house, tripping once on her own manicured lawn before slamming her front door. Alina sighed, the Colonel persona melting away as she leaned against Arthur's shoulder. "I'm going back to bed, Artie." Arthur wrapped an arm around her, kissing her forehead. "You want some coffee first?" "No," she mumbled, heading back toward the house. "But if she calls again, tell her I'm busy planning a SWAT raid on her garden gnomes." The Whispering Oaks HOA never bothered Arthur and Alina again. In fact, Brenda resigned as president 3 days later, citing health reasons, which everyone knew was code for being terrified of the woman who ran the police. A week later, a new sign appeared at the entrance of the neighborhood. It wasn't put up by the HOA but by a group of grateful neighbors who were finally free of Brenda's tyranny. It was small, discreet, and perfectly compliant with the bylaws. It simply read, "Whispering Oaks, we sleep better knowing who our neighbors are." Arthur sat on his porch watching Alina leave for work on Monday morning. She was back in her uniform, the stars on her shoulders gleaming. As she backed the black SUV out of the driveway, she tapped the siren, just a quick, playful whoop-whoop right in front of Brenda's house. Arthur chuckled, took a sip of his coffee, and waved. It was going to be a very quiet, very peaceful year.